Alright kid, get in here. Just the person I want to see too. You doing okay? Of course you are. You're above the ground, you're still breathing, and best of all, you're getting ready to watch a video from me, Screwface Capone, the gaming mobster. How awesome is that? This one's going to be a fairly short one. Recently, the Don got hooked up with a free Steam key for Edgar Allan Poe's Interactive Horror 1995 edition, developed by Inscape and published by G Media. This is actually a re-release of the 1995 title, The Dark Eye, but with the name changed, likely to avoid confusion with the long-running fantasy RPG series of the same name. Of course, when you start the game, you'll still see the game's old title. I think this one's better anyway because, let's face it, Edgar Allan Poe's Interactive Horror 1995 edition? Come on, that sounds generic. There's actually a bit of a story behind this game. Inscape, the game's developer, was a gaming company founded in 1994 by media mogul Michael Nash. The company began as a joint venture between two Time Warner subsidiaries, Time Warner Music Group and Home Box Office. Nash wasn't a stranger to gaming, or at least interactive media. He was the executive producer of Freak Show, which was an interactive CD-ROM made in collaboration with The Residents, which was a San Francisco-based collective of artists and musicians. The CD-ROM, based on the album of the same name, was widely regarded as one of the most influential titles of the early period. Of course, since this was at the dawn of the CD-ROM era, these will be referred to as multimedia, as this was the big buzz term of the day. Inscape's first release will be another collaboration with The Residents called Bad Day on the Midway. Along with Bad Day on the Midway and The Dark Eye, Inscape will produce a number of other games such as Assassin 2015, Drowned God, and The Adventures of the Smart Patrol, which was a collaboration with another band, this one being the new wave group Devo. Sadly, changing market conditions and a declining interest in the multimedia genre will lead to a downturn for the company. In 1997, Inscape will be acquired by Irvine, California-based Graphic Zone and renamed Ignite. Even worse, Graphic Zone itself will be shut down later that year. If you want, maybe I'll do more of a deep dive into Inscape and its games. Let me know in the comments. The Dark Eye was first conceived when Nash would show Russell Lees, a playwright, footage of his earlier work, Freak Show. Lees then had an idea of creating a house in which a different short story would exist in each room. The project's art director, Rebecca Barrett, opted for a stop-motion art style for the characters with animated puppets and clay-modeled faces. This was done as Barrett's goal was to, quote, subvert the look of computer 3D art by creating a more homemade feel. To that end, she would bring in Doug Beswick, co-founder of visual effects company Flat Earth Productions and an industry veteran who worked on TV and film such as The Addams Family, Xena Warrior Princess, Blade, Gumby, and Aliens. His team would handle puppet creation along with prop design and animation. Ariel Jones would design the costumes for the puppets, and the animated models will be integrated into the game's 3D backdrops. Alex Arco, the project's 3D director, will reach out to a researcher to make sure that the game's environments were period accurate. At the same time, he also wanted to ensure that the environments would feel moody and unsettling. Postmodernist author, writer, and wife killer William S. Burroughs will be brought in to provide vocal work. Every detail of the game was painstakingly crafted, with even seemingly minor aspects such as the interface being given sizable attention. Eric Lawyer, the game's interface producer, would decide to use a hand for interactions rather than the traditional point-and-click cursor. He felt that this would be a more natural and realistic approach. Like with his earlier works, Nash and his crew were going all in with the use of the multimedia format as a vehicle for interactive storytelling. Anyway, at its core, this is a classic point-and-click adventure game in the vein of Myst. It's important to note that this isn't a full remaster, it's more of a restoration. It runs on the Scum VM engine. Still, as someone who cares about game preservation, it's always great to see older and more obscure titles being brought back for modern audiences. Now, full disclosure, I never played these kinds of games much growing up because I never had access to a PC with a CD-ROM. Therefore, the only way I would experience these games is if someone installed them on a school computer lab, a friend or a relative had one, or maybe I came across a display at some joint like CompUSA or Babbage's. Anyone remember those stores? Even then, I never even heard of this title, let alone play it, so I don't have any frame of reference as to how it stacks up to the original 1995 release. The game adapts 3 stories from Edgar Allan Poe: The Telltale Heart, Berenice, and The Cask of Amontillado. What makes these interpretations stand out is that you'll experience each tale from 2 perspectives: the victim and the killer. This adds a unique psychological layer to the storytelling. Reading The Cask of Amontillado is one thing, maybe even watching it as a TV show or a movie. It's another thing when you're playing as Montresor as you're stringing poor Fortunato along, knowing full well you're getting ready to backdoor him. And it's yet another thing when you're playing as Fortunato as he's being sealed alive in the catacombs. The game itself takes place inside a mansion. During the daytime segments, there's an ongoing narrative which serves as a framing device. The story involves your uncle, along with your brother and your cousin, whom said brother wants to marry. Yeah, classic Edgar Allan Poe, right? At certain points, however, you slip into a nightmare version of the house, now eerily empty. This is where you uncover Poe's stories, and you trigger them by interacting with reflective objects that are scattered throughout the environment. There's no fail state, there are no branching choices, there's no in-game user interface, and not much in the way of traditional gameplay. You simply explore the mansion using a mouse, and you interact with objects by clicking on them. A pointing finger means that you can move to another area, an open hand signals an interactive object, and when the hand is cupped, then that means mousing over the object will trigger something more significant. This will be something like a character's inner thoughts or memories. These sequences, along with the rest of the game's cinematics, are told through a series of QuickTime movies. That should tell you how old school this game is. They even got that fuzzy looking JPEG artifacting. Kinda crazy to believe that this was cutting edge back in the mid-90s. But I guess this old school look is part of the game's charm though. This game is very much a narrative driven experience. It's got more in common with quote unquote walking simulators, as much as I hate that term, like Gone Home or Amnesia. The game's visuals, with the stop motion animation, the clay sculpted models, and the puppets, have that uncanny valley level of weirdness. However, it's perfect for the source material, and the creepy and unsettling look of the game's characters really drive home the game's eerie presentation. You don't see stop motion much in games nowadays, especially given the industry's usage of million-dollar budgets and fancy graphics engines, so it's great to see the way that's utilized here. The music was composed by Thomas Dolby, which many 80s music fans will remember from the hit song She Blinded Me With Science. Also contributing to the soundtrack are Chuck Mitchell and Blake Leah. If you're a fan of The Wire, then that last one should sound familiar to you. He's the one who performed The Fall, which is the show's closing theme. The soundtrack is just as unsettling as the graphics. What the game lacks in gameplay, the audio and visual features make up for it. The music, just like the graphics, does a great job of setting the tone and drawing you into the atmosphere. That said, the game's not without its issues. There are bugs and glitches, and I ran into moments where I got soft locked and had to restart. And like many games of this era, you'll spend a fair amount of time clicking around, trying to figure out what to do next. So don't feel bad if you end up having to check out a walkthrough. So with all that out the way, should you play it? Well, this game isn't going to be for everyone, especially if you're into hardcore action. But if you got nostalgia for point-and-click adventures, or you're a fan of Edgar Allan Poe, this is a fascinating piece of game history that's worth checking out. If you made it to this part of the video, then Don wants you to do him a quick favor. Go to the comments and drop the word nevermore just so I know you've been watching. Also, while you're at it, feel free to let me know your thoughts. Since you're already here anyway, why not drop a like while you're at it? If you're new to the channel, by the way, welcome. I like to cover retro games, you know, like the one you just saw, and indie games. I do reviews, again, like the one you just saw, previews, hardware unboxings, trailer reactions, documentaries, and other cool game-related stuff. If that sounds good to you, and you want to join the Mafia, you can hit that big red subscribe button and I'll make you a made man. If you want to do me one better, hit that bell icon and that way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. I got tons of cool stuff on the way, so you're not going to want to miss any of it. Until next time, I'm Audi 51,000 G, kinfolk.